Before getting too started, I want you to know that throughout this sermon I'm going to be using various pronouns for God. I hope you'll get something out of this, and I think it's important to explore the idea of God through different language, so I hope you kind of see this reflected in my sermon. I'm also going to take a little bit of a winding road to get to the verses that we've just looked at. I'm sure absolutely no one in the congregation is familiar with me rambling a bit to get to a topic, so this might be a bit new. So I'm going to start where everything should start. Genesis 1, right? Like much of the Bible, it's got fascinating depth of meaning to look through, to sift through. But what I'm going to be looking at here is the gendered nature of God that's introduced here. In the Hebrew text, God is introduced as masculine. He creates the heavens and the earth. This is immediately juxtaposed, it shifts direction where she, the Spirit of the Lord, hovers over the waters. A lot of people have explored what this means to apply this to us, but I think it's really interesting. It says a lot about a God who chooses this language to refer to themselves, who takes and appropriates the language that we use as humans and applies it to themselves. When we look at the Bible in the order it's been presented, basically the first thing that we see about God and the first thing that we're introduced to is how similar they are to us. So many people see them as beyond understanding, beyond a human form, beyond gender, and perhaps they are, but they carefully and deliberately give us this very human, this very tangible way to understand themselves. God says through these words to look into the world, to see the things of the world that you can touch, that you understand. Get an empathy for these things and then bring it to God, understand God through this empathy. God says to us, don't think of me as a far-off entity that you can't understand. Throughout the whole Bible, they say, here's how you can understand me. I think it is worth noting that a lot of the language of the Bible that is used to describe God is masculine, and there's a lot of historical reasons why this is true, but it's by far not exclusive. As a mother comforts her child, they say to Israel, so I will comfort you. The gender of God is not the only way that she relates to us. There's an idea of God is God, I am who I am. Is there anything else that we need? Is there anything else you know to need? Is there anything else that you need to know? The Bible questions us. Yes, I think there is other things we need to know. I think that there's so much to know and to understand about God, and one of the ways she does this is through names. When God sees Hagar in the desert with her son, Hagar looks up and gives God a name. From the image of Adam naming the creatures of the world, names have had an importance to understanding things, and this is no different. God receives this name and later gives us names to call herself. And I think this is another example of God giving us ways to explore and understand her identity as something that we can grasp and that we can comprehend. God isn't just something to be known at a distance. She gives us specific names to call her, names that give us a structure to understand her and to also relate to her. She says, God is the God who provides. He is the God who heals. She is the creator, mighty and strong. They're the God who sees our hurt and who we look to. She gives us these names, often in Hebrew, as ways to grasp and understand her in a very tangible way. She says, the firm but tender touch of somebody healing you when you're sick, that's me. She says, the person who brings you food and supplies when you have none, that's me. She doesn't let herself be unknowable, but gives us very real ways to relate to her. Finally, making my way to today's reading, it's a very interesting reading. It's definitively the chapter on the Trinity. In the first half, which is the half we looked at, it explores this relationship between God the Father and God the Jesus. In the second half that we didn't look at here, it explores the relationship between God the Jesus and God the Holy Spirit. It seems obvious to us today that, of course, this is talking about the Trinity. But I want to explore a little bit on the idea that Jesus was a Jew. And what does this mean for how the people of that time might have perceived this message? Dr. Rabbi Alan Brill notes that in Jewish thought, the interdivine structure of God is often free-floating, not this fixed creed that we have as Christians viewing the Trinity. Jesus, whether he was talking of the Trinity or not, was a Jew, was speaking to Jews. And I suspect that their understanding of what he might have been saying might be very different to how we understand it today. It's not a straightforward passage to read without the perspective of the Trinity. And it does leave some space for some big questions about Jesus himself. But I'm going to take a point and kind of work from that and see what we can actually get from this, making this assumption. What does Jesus mean if he thinks of himself perhaps as a prophet or as the Messiah, but not saying that he is God? I think assuming this to be true, then this is kind of a continuation of what I've looked at so far through my sermon. God gives us these ways to relate to him. Some of these ways seem as a contradiction to us. One doesn't typically imagine the mother of Israel being God the Father. And because these images are often metaphors given to us to understand him better, I don't think that this is any different to seeing this God as some sort of divine being, and Jesus is some sort of man. When we imagine Jesus as a human, fully human, growing, learning, making mistakes, fixing mistakes, I think we learn something and we get a powerful tool for understanding God as and a powerful way to relate to him. In the Hebrew Bible, we learn about a God who many people have called unknowable, but a God who does change his mind, who talks to Israel, who learns to understand them and grows through this. And then we come to the New Testament and we see Jesus, who says, be like me.